Yeah. We have it down there and up here. They have the clicker, so they're going to control it, and we'll just follow along from up here. No, they're controlling it down there, but we're following it. Yes, the same exact power. I'm just going to go from the first 5. A little bit better. One second. Turn off all the microphones, please.
Okay.
Yeah, so that the stream is not picking us up talking.
Oh, was it?
It hears, I mean, we had all the mics on, so it hears the room. So I heard all the fans going, and I'm sure if anyone was in here talking. So, 15, green, white, and red, and then the house mic.
What numbers are they? 41 to what? Oh,
Hit 15 first, turn that one off.
Okay.
So, 15, still on, because I can hear myself.
Where's that?
1 through 15,
Oh, 1 through 15.
there's channel 15 is on.
say hi.
Good. Thank
I
you
know.
so
Oh,
much
thank you for
for
choosing us.
hosting us.
Thank
This has
you
been
for-
wonderful. How are you doing?
I know you're looking to get started. I just wanted to say hi and thank you for choosing us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
We're not getting started quite yet.
Oh, okay. All right. So,
Now speaker is actually like 5 minutes away, so we will not be starting with that.
you're in a good place?
Great place.
Okay.
And you all have been amazing
Good.
with this event.
I'm glad to hear that you have been supportive and responsive. And,
Yes,
been meeting your
absolutely.
needs.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna sit down.
All right, so I will, once we start, I don't know if we're on or not. Once we start, because we're streaming to YouTube right now. Once we start, I'll just come up here and call everyone in order, and then I'll just go directly to you. Just say your thing. Speaker is next, but David James will introduce the speaker.
Okay, so I will, after I'm done, I'll just leave here tonight.
Yes.
Okay. And you make sure that I'm off to something else.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just
We appreciate you stopping.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
Yeah.
picking us for this opportunity.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank
all right,
you.
thank you.
Y'all did such a good job. You might be picked again and again.
We're up for it. We look forward to it.
Thank you. How are you doing? I'm good. Thank you.
So, and wish you well as they watch out for that one right there, this Charlotte Crutchfield one. Let me tell you, this Charlotte, this one.
Yes, so you know, if you can actually keep that right Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. If you could please, thank you. If you could please, everyone, take a seat. Thank you so much. Do we have seats for everyone? You all are okay over there? Okay, I just want to make sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Delegate Janelle Wilkins, and I am proud to serve as chair of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland. We are going to get started now with our full program, and you'll hear more from me a little bit later. But at this time, as we say in the House of Delegates and in the Maryland General Assembly, I am calling this event to order. And we are going to start by hearing from our host today, who I'm so grateful on behalf of the entire Legislative Black Caucus. We thank you for your hospitality to Montgomery College. Our president of Montgomery College, Dr. Jermaine F. Williams.
Thank you so very much. Good evening, everyone. It's so wonderful to be able to host, to see so many elected officials and community leaders here this evening to keep progress moving forward. Speaker Jones and Caucus Chair Delegate Wilkins and all the members of the Legislative Black Caucus, it is, again, an absolute honor to host you all. Congratulations on a very productive legislative session. We are deeply appreciative. And for all of our community members, welcome. Welcome. If you haven't been here before, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back to your community's college. We are so honored to serve you. Here at Montgomery College, you can become the next Saldiska Tapa, right? She's a registered nurse. She obtained her nursing degree here in our Health Sciences Center just across the street, and today she can be found serving patients at Suburban Hospital in Bethesda. Or you can become the next Saul Graham, a trailblazer, a leader, and the founder of Quality Biological, a life sciences company in Gaithersburg. Or you can represent Montgomery County in Annapolis, like Delegates Gabe Acevedo and Greg Wims, right? Our alumni stay in the county. They continue to make a huge impact in our county, and for that, we are grateful. Grateful for the 40,000 students who make up one of the most diverse institutions of higher education in the United States of America. More than 150 languages can be heard in our classrooms and labs. Montgomery College is designated by the Department of Education as a minority-serving institution, specifically a Hispanic-serving institution and an Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander serving institution. With 144 degree and certification options, students become anything and everything, from an engineer to a school teacher, from a cyber analyst to a lab bench worker. Yet, and I know so many of you know this, despite many options that Montgomery College provides for an affordable, high-quality post-secondary educational experience, many residents still struggle to achieve that education, right? They struggle to afford that low-cost, high-quality education. More than 60% of MC students attend part-time to balance their lives and or earn funds to pay for their education. While such students, and probably a lot of us experience that part-time situation, they should be lauded for their persistence, their determination, their grit. We know that part-time attendance negatively correlates to completion. National data tells us that less than 8% of part-time students complete an associate's degree within 4 years of high school graduation. National data also illustrates that only 11% of students from the lowest income households will complete a degree within 6 years of graduation. Right? And why am I sharing this now with all of you? It's to be thankful and continue to impress upon everyone here the importance of CADE, right? CADE is so vital for our residents. Your longstanding commitment to the community college funding formula is a major driver of equity in our state. Maryland's community colleges are the largest providers of post-secondary education for people of color. Maryland's community colleges are the largest provider of post-secondary education for people of color. In fact, approximately 50% of all undergraduate students who identify as Black or two or more races are enrolled at one of our 16 community colleges. Because of CADE funds, Montgomery College remains half the price of the University of Maryland. Additionally, you've adopted legislation to decentralize the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship. As a result, access to these funds will increase and enable more Marylanders to obtain a credential of economic, social, and community impact. Let me also thank you as I close for the Catherine and Isaiah Leggett Math and Science Building that's under construction at this very campus. You delivered the funds to make this project a reality, sending a clear message that zip code will not dictate access to high-quality education, to high-quality classrooms and labs. You plainly and passionately get our mission to unlock potential, transform lives, and ultimately fuel the Maryland economy with homegrown talent. In closing, we look forward to our continued partnership to lift up all Marylanders. Our 16 community colleges are excited to continue to work with you, right? To amplify avenues to access completion and post-completion success, right? To create paradigms that enhance progress. Now is the time to reconsider the educational delivery models, to make transfer truly seamless and student-centered, and to make sure part-time students get their fair share of financial aid. Working together, more Marylanders will gain access to good jobs and family-sustaining wages. We are, again, immensely grateful for your support. Thank you. And congratulations again on your legislative accomplishments, and thank you so very much for all that you do for Maryland. Thank you, and welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Delegate Greg Wims, the newest member of the Montgomery County delegation and the Black Caucus of Maryland. Thank you. Thank you so much. It is my honor to introduce the Speaker of the House, Adrian A. Jones, this evening. Speaker Jones has served in the House since 1997, has been an active member of the Black Caucus from then to present. As a member of the House of Delegates, she served on many powerful leadership roles, such as Speaker Pro Tem and Chair of the Capital Budget Subcommittee. In 2019, she broke the glass ceiling and made Maryland history as the first woman and the first African-American Speaker of the House, Maryland House. Let's give a hand for that. She has been unanimously elected each time by the members of the House because of her firm, fair, and wise leadership. We are honored to be joined this evening by the Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates. Montgomery County, give a warm welcome to Speaker Adrian A. Jones. And let's stand. Let's give her
Thank you, Delegate Williams, for the introduction. And thank you, Dr. Williams, for you are still here. Where are you? He leave? He left? Left or went to the men's room? Well, tell him to thank him for his welcome. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to be here at the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland kickoff for our 2023 Town Hall events. For the past 53 years, Maryland's Black legislators have been united in our effort to push the boundaries on diversity in thought and leadership. We move the needle on equity and justice and change how we improve and invest in our communities. Most importantly, over the past 53 years, we've grown this caucus to be the largest, let me say this again, the largest state legislative Black caucus in the country. With these numbers on our side, we're taking on the most important challenges of our time and pass transformational legislation to reform a broken policing system, fully fund our HBCUs, provide historic investments in our public schools, and yes, that's how I'm educated up there. Initiate a statewide Black agenda to promote economic mobility and address the impacts of over 200 years of systemic racism. We know that this change only happens when leadership is diverse, when every voice is heard and represented. As was mentioned, I first arrived in the House of Delegates in 1997. At that time, there was only one Black committee chairman. That was Howard Pete Rawlings, who was chairman of the Appropriation Committee. There were no Black vice chairs on any committee. While I always respected the work they did, it was hard not to feel that this lack of diversity was holding our state back. When I became Speaker of the House in 2019, I knew that we were ready for a new wave of leadership in the House of Delegates. Today, I'm proud that my leadership team reflects the diversity of our state. I'm proud that half of our committee chairs and vice chairs are members of the Legislative Black Caucus. And I'm glad and I'm proud that when we take a vote on a bill or a position on an issue, it represents us, our voice, our diversity, and our power. I'm the type of person who likes to watch and listen to see who is best to lead in Maryland. You may not realize it, but I always attend our weekly caucus meeting during session. And I've seen for myself the talent we have right here in the caucus. The people in this room are the ones who are going to create more equity and opportunity for Black communities and who are going to lead us to policies that will change the lives of more Marylanders. Our caucus is strongest when we speak with one voice, but remain a diverse body of thoughts and ideas. Let's continue to grow and support each other so we can guarantee that policies about Black people do not happen without Black people. Tonight, as we reflect on our accomplishments from the 2023 legislative session, I want to make sure that we recognize our leader and chair, Delegate Janelle Wilkins. In her first year as chair, Delegate Wilkins helped us navigate complex policy debates around cannabis legalization, housing, and public safety. As a trusted member of my leadership team and as the vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee, I know I can count on Delegate Wilkins to represent the voices of those disenfranchised in our schools, in our elections, and in our economic systems. Therefore, it is my honor to introduce the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland, Delegate Janelle Wilkins, back here for your remarks.
Thank you, everyone. All right, well, thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Thank you to Dr. Williams for his leadership. And we are just so grateful. There are not many states in this entire country where, well, we are the only one with a Black governor. We have a Black Speaker of the House, a Black treasurer. We are the envy, I'm telling you, of every state in this nation with the work that we have been doing, because that representation matters. And I want to specifically thank the Speaker for how she has elevated Black leadership in the Maryland General Assembly in historic ways during her tenure. So thank you so much, Madam Speaker. We thank you for being here. All right, so we are going to go ahead and kick off this program in terms of the legislative recap aspect of it. And I'm going to ask every member of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus to come on up behind me for a moment, because we stand together. We have members here who are from near and from far. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We really appreciate members who've come from other districts and other counties. So as Madam Speaker mentioned, we're the largest Black caucus in the entire nation. We are 66 members strong, spanning from Baltimore City to the Eastern Shore to Montgomery County, Prince George's County. We are spanning the entire state. And our caucus is very diverse, just like Montgomery County, just like the Black community in Maryland, where we have members who are Afro-Latino, members like me who are Caribbean-born and have Caribbean roots. We have African immigrant members, and the diaspora, the Black diaspora, is extremely diverse, and our Black caucus represents that. We were founded in 1970, 53 years ago. And you can imagine in the state of Maryland, 1970 was a very, very different time than it is now. And so the few members of the Black caucus at that time came together and said, let's stand together around working towards issues that impact Black Marylanders. And that's how the Black caucus was founded in 1970. So for 53 years, we have fiercely advocated for issues impacting Black Marylanders all across the state. And that representation matters, especially here in Montgomery County. Before 2018, in Montgomery County, no Black woman had ever been elected to the state legislature. So when you look at these members here, not a single member up here before 2018 would have been a Black woman from Montgomery County. And that matters. Our voices matter. The issues that we bring to the table matter. I also want to lift up Chairman Smith, who is the first and only Black senator from Montgomery County. So we are certainly growing. We are still making first in our county and in our state. And with your support and our continued gatherings like this, where we come together and inform each other and have a path forward, we can continue to ensure that we have those wins. So I do want to lift up and ask them to waive, specifically the members from Montgomery County. We have 7 members of the Legislative Black Caucus. So in Montgomery County, we send 34 members to Annapolis to represent us. 7 are Black members or members of the Black Caucus, and those 7 are the ones who help plan and put on this event. So 7 of us represent you. Chairman Will Smith, who is the chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. Delegate Gabriel Acevero from District 39, who's on the Appropriations Committee. Delegate Charlotte Crutchfield from District 19, who serves on the Judiciary Committee. Delegate Bernice Maricoon North, District 14, who serves on the Ways and Means Committee. Delegate Pam Queen from District 14, who serves on the Economic Matters Committee. And Delegate Greg Wims from District 39, who's on the Ways and Means Committee. I also recognize and tremendously thank our Black Caucus members from other counties who are here with us, standing strong with us here in Montgomery County. We have Delegate Gary Simmons, delegate from 12B. Delegate Stephanie Smith, who's the chair of the Baltimore City delegation. We have Delegate Jennifer White from Baltimore County. Delegate Jamila Woods, who's a delegate from Prince George's, and who's also the secretary of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland. So we thank you for your leadership. Finally, I'd like to make sure I recognize some very important elected officials who took the time out of their evening to join us. We have our comptroller, a former member of the House, Brooke Learman, who is here. Go ahead and stand up, Madam Comptroller. We have the Vice President of the Montgomery County Board of Education, Daniel Caroma, and I also saw Kina, who is also with the Board of Elections. Sorry, I said Board of Education, I meant Board of Elections. Daniel Caroma as well as Kina are both here. Councilmember Gabe Albornoz is here or was here. Thank you so much, Councilmember. Councilmember Stewart, Kate Stewart, thank you so much for being here. Pam Luckett, who is our representative here on the Central Committee, thank you for being here. Councilmember Kristen Mink, thank you so much for being here. As well as Delegate Jared Solomon, we appreciate you for joining. And I hope I didn't miss anyone, but last but not least, no, I haven't. Oh, okay, yes. No, the county executive and I had a conversation today, and I appreciate him also attending. I just want to ask our county executive, Mark Elrich, to please stand up and be recognized. From the Central Committee, we have Arthur Edmonds here. Arthur, I can't give him a big wave because I couldn't even find you in the room. And my district mate, our newest majority in the House of Delegates, majority leader. So I want everyone to stand on their feet and congratulate him, please. Our majority leader in the House, David Moon. And finally, I'm going by my sign-in sheet, but I will not want to forget our first black public defender in the state of Maryland, Natasha, who is here. So do you all see how we work together and how they make sure I don't mess up names, miss people, mispronouncing, saying wrong words? So thank you so much to this wonderful team, Legislative Black Caucus. We are very excited to go ahead and get started. So before we do that, to provide some context for this event today, in the months leading up to legislative session, we're in session for 90 days, January through April. We have 90 days to get the job done for Marylanders. But the work does not start in January. Throughout the preceding year, we're meeting with community members, we're holding spaces like this, we're meeting with constituents, connecting with each other to identify priorities as a Black Caucus around what we want to see get done. How do we move the needle for Black Marylanders during the session? And so we outlined 5 priority areas for this year for 2023. Those are Black wealth, Black health, housing, justice reform, and the cannabis legalization, as well as education issues. So today, during the program, we are going to go through the legislation that the Black Caucus of Maryland championed this legislative session and how we help to move the needle in those 5 areas. We'll also raise other bills and other issues that we think that you all will care about in this room to make sure that we're giving you a recap of what got done during the session. There were over 2,400 bills that were introduced this year. 800 of them passed. And we are excited to go through all 800 of those bills this evening. I'm just kidding. We're going to provide that we're going to provide that helpful snapshot for everyone of the critical Legislative Black Caucus priorities. So thank you so much again, colleagues. At this time, I am going to turn it over. Some of you are going to run out of the room, huh? I'm going to turn it over to Delegate Pam Queen to start us off on our Black wealth and MBEs area.
All right. Thank you so much, Delegate Wilkins. Good to see so many of you out here. I know that this is such an important topic to all of us in the Black community, but also the county and state as well. So we really want to make sure that we talk about those issues that I know all of you have asked us about. So we're going to first start to talk about creating and maintaining wealth in the Black communities. And so we're going to talk about those structural barriers to wealth creation, talk about policy approaches that we can look at for individuals, as well as households, as well as businesses, to create generational wealth in our communities. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to start to talk about is this difference between income versus wealth. Distinguish between merely increasing income and generating wealth through the creation of or the ownership of assets that are appreciable. And so we want to make sure that we are turning our income to assets that appreciate in value, and that you can pass on to generations. And we also want to look at some lifestyle changes, right? So we can be more investors and savers of our income versus being consumers of our income, right? Spending it all up. And so one of the big barriers to creation of wealth is the wage gap. Okay, so I know you've kind of heard of the wage gap. If you haven't heard of it and you're black, you felt the wage gap. What that wage gap is that there's the difference between like jobs that we do in comparison to what a white male may make to what we make. And so on average, blacks earn 78 cents, or making 78 cents to the dollar that a white male makes. And that's even more so of a problem for women, black women, where we're at 69 to 70 cents per dollar of a white male. So that is one of the things we need to look at, and we have legislation and we can talk about that looks at trying to have parity in the wage gap. But even with the wage gap, there's still ways that we can create wealth in our communities. So if I were to ask you if there was one asset to own that would create wealth, what would that asset be? Home ownership. Home ownership is the key to creating wealth and generational wealth in our communities. And so yes, you can see this is a report of some of the data that's coming from the Urban Institute. They have a great report that talks about the disparity with home ownership as we relate here in Maryland, as it relates to blacks, as it compares to others races. And you can see that those numbers still are very low. Even though we can see some increases over the years, those numbers are often very low. Now, what contributes to that? Well, one of the things that we know from the NARAB, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, that tells us that blacks have a very high loan denial rate, where we get denied loans at greater than 30% compared to less than 15% for white counterparts. And some would say, well, you know, that's because we have a lot of debt, and we do have a lot of debt. Student loans, other type of things we have debt in. Also, you know, some contributed to low credit scores. But even when you start to peel the onion and look at our credit scores as compared to whites with similar credit scores, they still have loan acceptance, more so than us. And so there's still some things we need to do there that are structural in nature. The other areas that are contributors are the low appraisal rates and redlining that also impacts us. And this is some of the things that we kind of focused on this session in the General Assembly, but that really robs the value of our homes. So you kind of know, I'm sure you've all heard of, or maybe if you've ever sold a house and you were black, you had to take down all your pictures, you had to take down anything that made someone know that you were a black person buying that house. The same house, same number of bedrooms, same sort of, you know, appliances, same number of amenities. But if they see pictures of someone who was black in that home is going to be valued at a lesser value. And we also have the issue of redlining, where we have, for years, people are denied loans in high income areas, and they can find that same home in another area. So we've heard at some of the priority meetings, we hear about how the home value could be the same house, the same model, and it's in one school district, and it sells for this certain amount, but you take that same home in another school district, and it sells for a lot less. And so a couple of the bills that we looked at this this session kind of deal with that issue. So one of the Legislative Black Caucus's priorities, HB 669 and SB 455, looked at the biases in home appraisals. We know that this happens a lot. It happens here in Montgomery County, but in Prince George's County, it happens a whole lot more than we see here. And so this impacts people being able to get home equity loans, to be able to use that. Home equity loans are one of the, oh, what's happening? Do you have to do a time thing? Come back, come back. Then you're robbing me of my presentation. Give me a break. Come back. No, it's a timer that, and I know as a school teacher, it's a timer that these things have.
That is not your timer. We are going to ask our tech person to come and help us out here. Well, that is a good idea, though, around time, right? Just have it, go.
Well, that's okay. I can talk about, I'll talk about my visual aids. I was joking with all of my colleagues. My other job, when I'm not here, is a professor at Morgan State University. So I don't talk. Thank you. So any presentation I give is always accompanied by a PowerPoint. They're like, we're doing PowerPoint. I'm like, I'm doing PowerPoint. You may not do PowerPoint, but I'm doing PowerPoint. So anyway, so let's continue this discussion. So the other bill that we also worked on or passed this session, SB 445 and HB 625, is also looking at the impact of redlining. So what it's doing is incentivizing developers to make sure that they're building in those areas where they wouldn't have gotten the same value for it. So the state is going to make up sort of that difference for them. So instead of them saying, well, I'm not going to go to this area because I can't get that value for that house, I'm just going to go to another area. We want to encourage them to go to those areas that have been less valued in the past so that we can start to build that sort of equity in that area. Because as we do comps, as you know, when we do comparables, when people are looking for selling their houses or looking to get home equity loans, you're comparing it to the most recent house that's sold in that area. So if that most recent house is now elevated in its value, that helps that area. So that is one of the things we're doing as it relates to creating wealth through home ownership. All right, the other thing that we want to talk about is creating wealth through business ownership. So there's a stats 2. Go back. So we talked about that. We talked about those 2 bills. So creating wealth through business ownership. Yeah, that's where we want to be. So this is some data that comes from Prosperity Now. They look at this issue of, again, wealth creation from an income standpoint, a household standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. And so some of the issues that we find that there's a low percentage of business ownership by people of color as it compares to white business owners. But the biggest thing that is concerning is the average value of the home, of those businesses, right? If you can't create businesses that are making the value that you need, that is also a problem. And so some of the issues as it relates to that, I know one of the things we don't think about when we talk about starting businesses, but there are some businesses that traditionally, based on their industry, have higher value. Those businesses are wholesalers, those businesses are manufacturing, those businesses are construction businesses. And if you could do, I get some more time. So if you could do anything to increase the value of home ownership, we should look at the types of businesses you're starting. And so we want to look at that as a priority. Also, lack of capital. As we know, we need capital to grow our business, to start our businesses, so efforts we can do there will help us as well. So some of the legislative priorities were to, again, work with our Maryland Minority Business Enterprise, MBEs, to look at some of the provisions, making sure we're giving the access to procurement and opening those up and making sure we extend the dates on that, as well as also as in making sure that we are involving small minority businesses in sort of the other upcoming industries, the wind industry and the video lottery industry. We also had a bill, SB 53, to assist nonprofits. We have a lot of blacks who, and they always ask us, what are we doing for our nonprofits? We have a lot of businesses that are in the area of nonprofits. We need to look at that. Other sorts of support to our regional enterprise, strategic enterprises, the RISE development areas, as well as Governor Moore's initiative. He had 14 bills that I think that he initiated this session. And one of them is this access to banking, access to money for venture capitalists to incentivize venture capitalists to invest in our low to moderate income businesses. So we want to make sure that we have, again, support for that. I want to leave you with some resources to know. A lot of times people say, well, what do we do in Maryland? What do we have in Maryland? So again, the MBE program is there to help you to do more state procurement efforts, so make sure you know about that, as well as the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. Very good networking, very good training and know-how. There's also the Montgomery County Black Collective, also another source to help you with your business development. In the area of home ownership, wanted to make sure you know about the Maryland Mortgage Program, MP, that has pathway to home ownership, loans for first-time home owners, flex loans for down payments, closing costs, as well as partnership matches. So again, we want to make sure you know these resources, as well as the Montgomery County Housing Commission has a part that deals with home ownership. I'm gonna leave you with this last piece to talk about, again, as we go future focus, what are the type of assets that we want to look at. We don't expect this wage gap to diminish anytime soon, so we wanna look at the assets you wanna own. You wanna own homes, as we've all said. We list vehicles up here. It's not so much as it's an appreciable asset, but it helps people to get to work, to get to places where they could be in a place where there's higher income. And again, blacks have the less ownership of any of the other racial groups in vehicle ownership as well. Other things we want you to think about are retirement savings. I know we all want to see that Social Security money you're going to get, but please save some money besides that on your own. Do any kind of matching that you can do with your company with pensions plans. Again, our retirement savings compared to others is about half. Ownership in business is about half, and investing in stock is another way. So again, leave you with not only owning more appreciable assets, but changing our savings and our lifestyle to save more and be prepared for retirement. So I'm gonna leave you there. A little bit over, but I think we did okay.
Perfect. As Chairman Smith is coming up, I want to flag that if you have note cards, you folks have note cards, we'll send them around. If you have questions, you can start writing them on these note cards that we can take a few questions in a moment.
Excellent. All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening. All right, my name's Will Smith. I'm the chairman of the Judicial Proceedings Committee in the Maryland State Senate. And first, before we get into the program, I do want to thank, again, Delegate Janelle Wilkins, the chair of the largest Black Caucus in the country. I also want to thank the Speaker of the House. Now, before I came over here, I have two daughters, I have a 10-month-old and a 5-year-old. My daughter just loves Janelle. I don't know what, you are Jacqueline's favorite. I don't know what it is, but you've got some competition tonight. Before I left the House, Jacqueline said, tell the Speaker I said hello and thank you. Because when we were at our last bill signing, we were signing a package of reproductive health protection bills, and which the Speaker was the lead sponsor on one, and I was on one as well. But during that emotional ceremony, the Speaker leaned over and gave me a pen and said, Senator Smith, give this to your daughter. She'll be proud of you today. And she wanted the Speaker to say thank you, because that's the type of Speaker she is. Not only is she the first African-American, not only is she the first woman Speaker of the House, but just a compassionate and brilliant woman. So I wanted to just lift her up and say thank you for that, because my daughter wanted me to do that. So, all right. look, in the Judicial Proceedings Committee, we had several lines of effort, and I'll tell you, we focused more on constitutional or the Supreme Court activity at the federal level, mainly on Dobbs and Bruin, so guns and abortion. That really dominated our lines of effort in the Judicial Proceedings Committee. But we also focused on housing and accessibility to housing, public safety reform. We continued our efforts for police reform. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about guns, public safety, justice reform, and housing reform. But right now, my segment focuses in on housing, and I know that I'm going to be working in partnership with Delegate Wims on housing reform because that's a top priority of his, not only through his work in the county, but also already had conversations. So Delegate Queen set the stage, did a lot of good stage setting for foreclosures and for home ownership rates. But just to kind of foot stomp it, some more statistics that I think you might find compelling in why we did some of the legislation that we did. So the data from May of 2023 says that there's been a 4% monthly increase in foreclosures in Maryland, and a 40% increase in the number of foreclosures since May 2022. And if you look at the statistics that were just pulled tonight, that Prince George's leads the way. Then you're followed by Baltimore County, Baltimore City, and then Montgomery County. It is, obviously, based on the numbers that you saw here earlier, that the largest African-American jurisdiction has the largest number of foreclosures, which is something that I think was top of mind for all of us as we headed into the legislative session. Also, for appraisals, Delegate Queen spoke to some of the appraisals and the challenges that we have there. In majority white areas, well over half of the appraisals from before you buy and then when you appraise and get ready to sell, came in well over the market value, whereas for African Americans it was well below. And so it's not a shocking statistic, but just a reality that we face in the Black Caucus and in the during the legislative session. So one of our leaders in housing and housing accessibility and equity is Delegate Marvin Holmes. And one of our Black Caucus priorities last session was House Bill 669, which was briefly spoken to during our last presentation. But that essentially, it changes the requirements for real estate appraisers. Now, in real estate appraisers in Maryland and throughout the nation, how much would you say they make annually? For about 9 months of work, really, actually. 9 months of work, how much would you say they make? I mean, someone just shout out a number. And it's well over six figures, okay? And in Texas, some of these folks are hitting up to 300,000. All right. In Maryland, how many appraisers do you think are African American? What percentage? It's 4%. And it's because there are essentially 3 tiers of access to appraisers. And the lowest tier requires about 1,000 hours of work. And that does not take in account for your degrees. You can have a master's degree. You could have a prestigious undergraduate degree. You have an associate's degree. It doesn't matter. It doesn't go to that 1,000-hour requirement. And I asked Delegate Holmes on the way here if I could tell the story, so I'll tell it. Delegate Holmes had his daughter, brilliant, graduated from Hampton University and had a master's degree, so the real HU. Had a master's degree, so came from stellar undergraduate, had a master's degree, could not qualify to become an appraiser without that 1,000-hour hurdle. So what this bill does is restructure and reframe, rework. So it allows folks that have the academic credentials and the lived experience to have that credential so they can go ahead and appraise, because we know more of us are in the game and in the space, there's going to be a level playing field and a more equitable assessment of our property in the future. And so that's why that was such an important piece of legislation that we passed out of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. The second bill that I'll speak to is Delegate Wilkins' bill, which was essentially would establish a rental assistance voucher program. Now, we're all pretty much familiar with the housing vouchers, those Section 8 housing vouchers, a federal program. And a few years ago, I worked with then Delegate Learman to pass something called the HOME Act, which got rid of housing discrimination based on your legal source of income, so retirement benefits, veterans benefits, to include that housing voucher, because that was one of the last vestiges of redlining and housing discrimination in the state of Maryland, which we just got rid of a few years ago. And that basically deprives folks of access to areas of opportunity and social and economic mobility, closer to schools, closer to your job, and so forth, closer to public transportation. And the majority of housing voucher owners are women of color with a job or two. And so, you know, that the myth of who folks are who hold vouchers is just completely wrong. These are professional folks going to jobs, people sometimes working two jobs to make ends meet and just not being able to do that. That's a grave injustice in the state of Maryland that helps chip away with. But there were still long waiting lines, people would sit on these lines for years. And so what Delegate Wilkins' bill would do, along with Chairman Guy Gazzone and the Budget Tax Committee, would have created a state program to complement what the feds were doing so that we could expedite that process and get more people into stable housing. And so what that bill would do is essentially create that program. It would be a line item in the budget. It would be within the DHCD, or the Department of Housing and Community Development, and it would unleash economic, social, and housing opportunity for thousands of Marylanders. And so we will go forward with that bill next year. I think we made significant progress this year, building on the Home Act. I'm sorry. Yeah. And making sure that it's fully implemented and passed and moving forward. So we need to put the money into it. So that's the number one thing that we need to do. So those are the two major housing priorities for the Black Caucus this year that came out of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. I think it dovetails nicely with Delegate Queen's work for African American investment in not only home ownership but in business and economic mobility. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation. I'll be back up to talk about guns and continued efforts of police and justice reform.
All right, we are going to go to education equity, and then we will collect those note cards, the first round of note cards. So if you have questions, please start writing them down in your note cards.
Okay, good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? Good, good, good. Well, I'm Delegate Bernice Mayer-Canor, representing District 14, along with my colleague, Gabe Acevedo, and we're just going to touch on a couple of the priorities of the Legislative Black Caucus this session. Now, some of you might be following the work with the blueprint. Does anyone does not know what the blueprint stands for? Wonderful. Okay, so the simplest way to put it is that we in Maryland are transforming the way we're doing education, and we're giving ourselves a timeline to do it by 2026. And counties all across the state are presenting plans to the board led by former County Executive Ike Leggett to determine whether we're going to actually have all these counties comply with our blueprint plan for education for Marylanders. Now, two of the bills I wanted to bring up, one of them deals with how to deal with the blueprint, because you can have the plans, but if you don't have the people, you're gonna have a problem, right? So we have the Educator Shortage Reduction Act that passed, HB 1219, and that bill did a number of things, and I'll highlight just some of them, particularly with this audience dealing with Black Caucus members in the Black community. The one thing it does is that it alters the eligibility for those who want to do early childhood education to become members of the Alternative Teacher Preparation Program. So it expands the pool of applicants for that program to make it easier for these schools to be staffed and get the staffing they need to actually implement the blueprint plan. The one thing it also does is that it's supposed to mandate the Department of Education, along with the Maryland Higher Education Commission, to sort out a strategy, goals on how to recruit and retain teachers. I hear the hum because this is what I've been hearing for months. Ever since the session has ended, I ask people, what are the issues? How do you keep teachers there? Well, the bill actually does that to mandate for the two agencies to work together to create the plan. What it also does, it mandates a stipend. So at the very least, there's going to be a stipend incentive for implementing a recruitment and retention plan. But the details are going to be worked out with these two agencies that I just mentioned. Now, it also allows us to have a dashboard. So we're holding ourselves accountable as a state to make sure that who we are recruiting, they're being retained. It's a diverse group of people. So it's going to be listing age, school, how they're retained, what education they receive, things like that, so we could actually hold ourselves accountable in diversifying our educator workforce. Now, the biggest thing I thought would be of importance to all of you all is the scholarship, the monies, right? So the Nancy Gramick Scholarship award. It used to be just for teachers. This bill expands it to public school professionals, including mental health professionals. So that is one way we're trying to expand the opportunities to make sure that people who are in the profession aren't suffering financial hardship as a result of that path. We also have the Janet Hoffman Loan Forgiveness Program. In the bill, it actually specifies that we're going to target these program opportunities to HBCUs and those who are not represented well in the education system and mental health professionals. So that's a big plus for us in the Black community. And you also have the Teacher Fellows of Maryland Scholarship Program. For those who graduate from a school that was considered high needs, defined by our criteria in Maryland, and want to go into teaching, this opportunity allows people who, especially people who are HBCU graduates, those who are, again, not normally in the profession of education, as well as those who are mental health professionals, to get into this program and make sure they have the opportunities that recently they probably wouldn't have but for the money. So this Teaching Fellows program expands the opportunities for people to get involved in education. So these are some of the things I wanted to bring up for this bill. It's a great bill. It's a lot of it. I want to just give you some highlights for that particular bill. Now, I'm going to switch over to our other priority. How many here have student loan debt? Okay, all right. How many of you have taken out at least $20,000? Okay, because I went to law school undergrad, so I got at least $20,000. Okay, how many of you still have at least $5,000 to pay? Okay, this tax credit that we have passed, thanks to our delegate Karen Toles of Prince George's County, is for you. That's what this tax credit's all about. And this, once you claim the tax credit, is good for up to 2 years after you claim it. So if things get kind of hairy and you forget, you got up to 2 years and then that credit's gone. The other thing about this credit is that actually the bill expands the pool of money to allow for the tax credit to be expanded. So up to $9 million for the tax credit. And it's actually a really good, but I appreciate our delegate Karen Toles, who's not here, for introducing that. I remember very vividly how excited she was. So great to see how it's coming to fruition because, you know, Black people have the hardest time with getting funding for schools. And they are the most, especially with Black women, they suffer the most from student loan debt. I can speak to that. You know, we all got to pay it like sometime this year, right? Unless Biden changes his mind, but I don't know. We'll see, exactly. And the one thing about this bill, though, is that it does prioritize state employees that graduate from higher education schools that have at least 40% of Pell Grant recipients. So it's dealing with those who are going to schools that are maybe financially disadvantaged. But again, this is about expanding the pool opportunities for all of us as Black Marylanders. And I'm going to turn over to Gabe to contribute to the conversation about how we're going to move forward and our future, what's next for HBC, for our Black Caucus.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Delegate Miracle North. As was mentioned, I'm Delegate Severo. I'm just going to touch really quickly on two important issues related to education and educational equity. Oftentimes when we talk about education, the focus is always pre-K through 12, but we don't talk enough about tertiary education, and specifically our 4 historically Black colleges and universities that are in the state of Maryland: Morgan State, Bowie State, Coppin State, and University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And for a little bit of background, you know, for a number of years, decades in fact, our state's 4 HBCUs, similar to that of HBCUs across the country, had been historically underfunded, whether it's by state government. We would see duplication in courses and programs, and we saw that right here in Maryland. It wasn't new. It was something that was taking place under successive administrations, and certainly didn't start with the current administration, Governor Moore. We've been having this discussion for a very long time about the underfunding of our 4 HBCUs, but in addition to that, program duplications, programs that were specific to these institutions that we're seeing other Maryland institutions not just introducing, but that impacts you know, HBCUs in terms of students, student retention, and funding. And so one of the things that came out of that decades of underfunding and that fight was a 15-year federal lawsuit against the state government about the underfunding and program duplication here in Maryland. And I'm proud to say that in 2021, the Legislative Black Caucus, under the leadership of our Speaker Adrian Jones, had secured the $577 million for our state's 4 HBCUs. $577 million, each institution getting close to $100 million, and that will be paid over the course of a decade. And so our institutions are already getting those fundings, they're already using it, whether it's for scholarship, whether it's for resources, infrastructure, et cetera, and that's key, especially when we talk about educational equity. And so today, we're continuing to ensure that HBCUs not just have comparable funding to other institutions, but they have the resources that they need, because we know that HBCUs are the #1 producers of public school teachers, of black engineers and black lawyers, et cetera. And so if we're talking economic development, we got to make sure that we're taking care of our state's 4 HBCUs. In addition to that, I want to touch really quickly on, just because there's a lot of national discussion around curriculums and what is being taught in schools and African American history. But a fight that I see the Legislative Black Caucus continuing to push for, and that is around curriculum and culturally responsive pedagogy, and making sure that when it comes to African American history and really the history of other groups in our state, that is something that's being reflected in our curriculum. Our teachers are being trained, as well as our students are seeing themselves reflected in the instructions, as well as seeing them in the teachers providing those instructions. And so those are going to be fights that the Black Caucus will continue to pick up, particularly around educational equity. I think Delegate Meriku North spoke very well about what we've done around Kerwin and still need to do to ensure that we're funding it over the next few decades. We've put forward a really ambitious plan, and we're committed to funding it. We're doing that, and we want to make sure that folks are aware of that. So with that, thank you all so very much.
Well, thank you so much to my colleagues who have done a wonderful job of outlining the priorities of the Legislative Black Caucus and the bills that we have passed. There were a couple of questions that were pre-submitted when everyone RSVP'd. We did take some questions, and I know one of the questions we'll start with those was regarding. Go back to our Q&A, there we are, was regarding taxes. When we talk about the issue of wealth, how are we helping to support families with tax relief? And I do serve on the Ways and Means Committee. I am the vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee, so I wanted to make sure that the person who submitted that question, that we're able to we're able to get to that one. Two of the bills this legislative session that we passed actually deals with governor's priority, dealing with the child tax credit and also the earned income tax credit. The earned income tax credit is one of the most proven anti-poverty measures. When we put money back into the pockets of poor people, we see that go back out into our communities locally. And we passed legislation, which was the priority of the governor, called the Family Prosperity Act, that expands the value, permanently expands the value of the earned income tax credit. So that our most low-income community members all across the state are able to keep more of their money that they are bringing in terms of their income. That was a really important bill. As part of that bill as well, we expanded our Maryland child tax credit so that now if you have a child under 6, if you also have an income that is less than $15,000, that you're able to claim a child tax credit. We hope to expand that to include more people in the child tax credit, more and more, and hopefully we'll be able to go back and continue to push those income limits so that more and more Marylanders can benefit from that. But of course, the federal child tax credit is what many of you and many individuals are able to benefit from. When it comes to our retirees and our seniors, I want to make sure that everyone is aware that there is a $1,000 tax credit for single filers who are seniors over 65 years old. So if there's anyone in this room, or your parents, or family members, make sure they're claiming that tax credit. If you're filing jointly, it's $1,750 in terms of that tax credit, so be sure to take advantage of that relief for seniors as well. So those are some of the bills that we've passed that specifically deal with taxes and our seniors. That was a pre-selected question. I will go to a couple of these. We are starting to run a little short on time. There's some long paragraphs here, a bit. So, and a few of these I'll get to sort of at the end. There is a question about how the blueprint can be successful if we don't address housing and the conditions of poor children in Maryland. That is a great question because housing absolutely impacts a child's ability to succeed. If there's a caucus member who wants to talk about it, they're welcome to come up, but I can quickly, sure, go ahead.
I guess I can start from here now. So thank you for that question, because as a new delegate, that's one of the things I'm thinking about. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee with, of course, my fellow vice chair, and I guess talked about education, but affordable housing, habitable affordable housing is key. That's key, because you're talking about equity. It's about the places where these children are living in our county. And it's inexcusable in our county, Montgomery County, not to make that the focus, because we have a bright pool of students in this county from all walks of life. So I appreciate that question, and I'm going to try to do what I can at the state level to address some of that in Ways and Means and the like. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Delegate America North. All right. There is a comment here about funding research that studies the harms caused by the drug war and ensuring there's opportunities for nonprofits to apply for state funding. So we're going to note that and take that back. Thank you. There's also a comment about considering an evaluation of administrative costs. This is one that is a bit of a paragraph, so I am trying to summarize it. In terms of the time, documentation, requirements, and effort it costs people to get help, which is a very good point. When we have these programs and these services and people need help, there are administrative costs associated with it. So that's something that we'll take back in terms of thinking of our priorities for the future. There's one on the homelessness crisis in Montgomery County. There are funds and supports that we provide in the budget around homelessness. The county more so does a lot of the work and efforts around addressing the homeless population in our county, but that is another really important priority there, so thank you for that. There is one around the DDA rent subsidy for intellectual development disabilities and making sure that increases each year. And that's something that we work on every single session and try to fight for in terms of our people with disabilities and those services in the state. So absolutely, we have members from appropriations who are hearing that as well. So thank you for that comment. And I think that is the gist. We'll try to come back to some of these. And if you do have questions or issues that you'd like to see us address, then please do write them on note card. I'll read them out. I'll make sure that we acknowledge them. And with that, we are going to get through the two other issue areas that we have, and then we'll have another time for question and discussion as well. Before we do that, I want to recognize our second vice chair of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland, who just joined us, Delegate Karen Tolles, who just walked in. All right, so I am up next, and I'm really excited to share with you all our work around health issues and also around our environmental priorities this legislative session. I have some very unfortunate statistics to share with you first. And this is what the core of our work around health and the environment was. Sadly, compared to other races, Black and African American people in our state and across the country have a higher rate of being diagnosed with cancer and the shortest survival rate. In addition to that, Black women actually are diagnosed with breast cancer at a slightly lower rate, but are 40% more likely to die as a result of breast cancer when compared to other women. And so Legislative Black Caucus prioritized this legislative session our work around addressing cancer disparities. Wanted to talk through a couple of those bills. One is House Bill 376, SB 184, and also the second bill associated with it, HB 815. What these bills do is that they take a look at cancer screenings. Because of our wonderful Affordable Health Care Act at the federal level, a lot of times cancer screenings are free. But what happens when there's an abnormality and someone needs to come back and there are costs associated with additional diagnostic testing? we see a huge trend, especially in the Black community where costs might be challenging, of people not returning for those tests, with costs being a barrier. So these two bills look at breast cancer and lung cancer and ensure that those follow-up required, needed tests are not a charge. There's no cost for people who are on both Medicaid and also on private insurance. So really glad that we'll get that across the finish line. That was a very important bill. We also passed legislation that deals with biomarker testing, and Delegate Tolles is here at the perfect time because this was her bill. She worked really hard on it during the session. Who's heard of biomarkers? Have you heard of biomarkers? I hadn't heard of it before our work on this. Okay, so a few people have. Biomarkers are what's called precision medicine. They take a look at the cancer, the proteins, the details of the analysis, so you can get a precise type of care for that cancer and what's going on in your body. If, God forbid, if I'm in that scenario, that is the type of precision that I like my doctor to be looking at and having a really tailored course of action to target that cancer. Unfortunately, not everyone has access to it, especially our low-income individuals on Medicaid, and not every private insurer covers biomarker testing. So with this legislation, we have ensured, and I'm glad that the governor signed this into law, and Delegate Tolles and others for their leadership, in the state of Maryland, biomarker testing will be required coverage when it comes to Medicaid and private insurers. So that was a big win this session. And finally, when it comes to Medicaid as well and our SNAP recipients, we want to ensure that if someone is utilizing SNAP food benefits, they probably also qualify for Medicaid. So how do we make sure that those programs, that's right, how do we make sure these programs talk to each other? And so that legislation is actually creating sort of a speedway, a very streamlined process for anyone in our state who's receiving SNAP food benefits to quickly be able to get enrolled into Medicaid. So that's gonna really ensure access for a lot of Marylanders. We're excited that we're able to prioritize that bill and get it passed. And I wanna thank my district mate, Delegate Charkoudian on the House side, Senator Malcolm Augustine on the Senate side, who's a member of the Black Caucus, for ensuring that that bill reached passage. And finally, something to look out for in the state of Maryland is that COVID really laid bare a lot of the issues around our healthcare system. From our state agency to health disparities, we actually passed legislation to start an overhaul of our healthcare services, of our government services when it comes to the administration and infrastructure of healthcare. And I want you to look out for HB 214. It's a commission that is literally studying everything from mental health, our access to mental health, our access to behavioral health in the state, our access that communities have, especially diverse communities have, to healthcare, to ensure that we are creating recommendations is overhauling the healthcare system here in Maryland. So look out for that commission that passed this legislative session. That was a priority of the Black Caucus as well. Very quickly, moving on to the environment. We prioritize legislation dealing with equity, the Environmental Equity Act of 2023, which was sponsored by Delegate Regina Boyce. This was a bill that we were not able to get to final passage, but we'll be bringing it back next year. But this bill is so important when we talk about equity and environmental justice. What this bill does, it says that when anyone is applying for a permit that is going to deal with something that could be harmful, we know that a lot of times when it comes to waste, when it comes to pollution, a lot of times those things are located near communities of color and near low-income communities. This bill says that the Maryland Department of the Environment has to review those permits, whether it's hazardous waste, whether it's air quality, whether it's other potentially harmful permits that are being applied for, and take a look at it from an equity lens, take a look at those populations that it's going to impact, the types of pollution, the types of impact, and must deny permits if it's showing inequality and injustice. So that is a critical bill that I want to make sure that we're all organized around to ensure that it passes next session. We're going to work together to ensure that it passes next session? All right, let's go. All right. And in the interest of time, I won't go into too much more on this, but we did expand our offshore wind goals. We now have wind goals here in the state of Maryland, created this year on the number of watts of wind to help us continue to combat climate change. All right. And we are coming up towards our final issue of the evening, justice reform and equitable cannabis legalization.
All right, good evening. I'm Delegate Charlotte Crutchfield, and I represent District 19 here in Montgomery County, and the communities in particular of Aspen Hill, Glenmont, Leisure World, and also Kemp Mill. So, I want to also mention to everybody, as Delegate Wilkins mentioned earlier, in 2018, you actually had your first African American women elected to the House of Delegates. And those three women are myself, Delegate Wilkins, and Delegate Queen. So obviously, we're bringing something different to the House, especially coming from Montgomery County. So I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and that committee deals with all of the court systems, administrative law, family law, juvenile law, all the different areas of those kinds of particular processes. And so I'm the chair of the subcommittee on family and juvenile law. But tonight I'd really like to talk to you a little bit about something that is monumental that's happening next Saturday. And I hope everybody in this room knows what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the decriminalization, okay? I didn't say legalization, even though you voted for it that way. I'm talking about the decriminalization of cannabis, okay? Effective Saturday, July 1st, you will be able to purchase it in a retail format. It will be available for recreational use by all people 21 and older. You'll be able to actually grow 2 plants if you'd like to. You can possess 1.5 ounces, okay? Again, 1.5 ounces, all right? Without any kind of civil penalty, without any criminalization around it. Now, if you go above that to 2.5, okay, you will have a civil citation, all right? And even above that, you will be fined with a misdemeanor. It will be a misdemeanor offense for you. So I want that to be clear here, that you understand what's going to happen on Saturday, because that is critical for you to know about, okay? So the other part of that is that it's going to be regulated, all right? The ability to purchase it, where you can do it, how much you can do it, what areas you can actually smoke it in, all of that will be regulated, okay? There will be fines for smoking in public, okay? The first fine is $50, after that it's $150, okay? So there is gonna be controls around it. But I'll tell you what really concerned me most about it was the fact that you, as an individual, could walk down the street, okay, smell like it, and possibly be stopped for it. And so myself, along with Senator Carter, sponsored a bill to eliminate those unreasonable stops and searches just because you smell like cannabis, okay? Just because something is legal, you can be stopped for it. You could be searched for it, no more, okay? Not only that, but if there's even money in the proximity of the cannabis, you can't be stopped and searched, all right? You can't be stopped and searched for the possession of 1.5 ounces. So that was critical, and guess what? That was a priority of the Legislative Black Caucus. So let me just tell you a little bit about this bill. This bill went through a lot, okay? And I have one of the public defenders here who helped to get this bill through, and she can tell you about it. But this bill went through a lot, okay? And if it was not for the courage of the Legislative Black Caucus members, and in particular our chairwoman, this bill probably would not have made it, okay? We had in-depth thoughts about it. We had just all kinds of debate about it, but it made it. It was the last bill on sine die to actually pass and close down the joint, okay? I mean, the Republicans, I hope there's no Republicans in here, but the Republicans even wanted to walk out on this particular bill, okay? Because they didn't get a chance to say anything about it, but our speaker rode that bill straight through and out, okay? And I also want to just thank somebody that's here who was pivotal in this bill as well, and that is Senator Smith, okay? Because as you know, the bills have to pass the House of Delegates, but they also have to pass the Senate. And guess who is the chair of Judiciary Proceedings, right? Guess who was there? Who is a member of the Black Caucus, okay? That bill came out with one amendment on it, and it was the amendment we wanted. And that made it most successful. And again, I just have to thank him for that, okay? So, it's really important for you to know here that, especially in the criminal justice area, we always need your support on all the bills we're doing. This stuff is hard, okay? This stuff is, I can't even describe the elements of what happens when you're hearing bills like this and recognizing that the other side is not with you on these bills. And so that's when I want to encourage you, okay, to come out, call us. If you see us, floundering, if you see us having problems, if you see us with obstacles, call us and say, I'm with you. And that's really what I'm looking for from this event. I am so happy to see so many familiar faces, so many leaders here, but I do want you to know how important it is for you to be a part of all of this. You are the ones that have elected us. You are the ones who have helped, in some cases, to appoint us, but we want you to be a part of this and to know we're working hard for you, and what you want us to do is what we will do, but it has to be with your assistance. So again, I want to thank you for being here, and I just wanted to talk about that bill. I also want to add on about HB 1071, which is the bill I was just speaking about, is that it also did include the reduction of fines because one of the things I was also concerned about was the fact that people are going to be consuming cannabis in public. We know that's going to happen. It's just like cigarette smoking. People are going to be out there. They're going to make mistakes. They're not going to realize what they need to do. And originally, in order to be cited for smoking in public, the fine was $250, and we were able to bring it down to $50, okay? And then for that second offense to be $150, and that's important too, because that affects our community, okay? So again, I appreciate you guys being here, and I hope that you will continue, like I said, to support us, because we do need your support. Thank you.
All right, Delegate Crutchfield, I'll do the standing and walking around point too, but the last time I did this, I'll tell you the truth. Look, I was walking, it was a format like this. I went on one side and, a gentleman was looking at me and he was like, looked at me weird, and I was like, all right, that's weird, but okay. So I walked on to the other side and another gentleman looked at me and he had another weird face looking at me, and I was like, all right, well, this is not going so well. And I realized my fly was open. So I got to I'm a little bit, I triple checked myself this time around, all right, triple check. No, but look, I'm going to tell the truth on all this. Delegate Crutchfield, thank you for your explanation and the shout out. But I will tell you, for the odor bill, I actually had some serious reservations for it because on the other side you always have my whole kind of ethos in thinking about legislation is to be radically inclusive, listen to everyone, bring everyone to the table, even people you disagree with vehemently, have them sit there, go through their disagreements with you, and then come up with some reasoned solution. And I got to give three people a shout out for this bill. One, Elizabeth Hilliard, who's sitting here, from the Public Defender's Office. Two, the public defender, and three, the chair of the Black Caucus, who actually sat front row on the last day of session to make sure I got stuff done. So Which is true. But we had some vigorous debates, and I had some serious reservations about some of the elements and its kind of downstream consequences for public safety and seizures of guns in Montgomery County in particular. And so I do want to give them, and Senator Carter was unflinching. So I want to make sure that she was the champion from start to finish on that. So really, Senator Carter was the one. I remember at the point when we were going to tack on that amendment, which was basically bring out of uncodified language the exclusionary rule and some other elements into the actual substance of the bill. I sat there on camera, and I'll tell you this, it's on camera, you can go look at it. I said, look, I'm with you on this amendment, but I fear if we pass this amendment, it could jeopardize the bill. So we went through, rolled it, it got on, and when it got to the House, the Speaker, as Delegate Crutchfield said, took care of business, and it was the last bill to pass, on sine die, and the Republicans went nuts. And you can go and look at that too if you're really bored. But so I do want to. I'll give some high level analysis on that, and then I'll dive into one of the other bills because I know we're short on time. Look, for Fourth Amendment searches and seizures, and the public defenders, you know this better than anyone else in the room. The Supreme Court has obviously, Fourth Amendment protects you from unlawful searches and seizures. But the Supreme Court, over the course of time, has interpreted certain exclusions to that, to the way that the Fourth Amendment is drafted. And in Maryland, we've had only really one statute on the books, which is the wiretap statute, that had basically another element of protection that was kind of above what the Supreme Court what the Fourth Amendment has said, and then it also has built in some other exclusions that the Supreme Court had not done through court decisions over the course of time. And so what this bill did is now has done that same thing, has built in, so for the exclusionary rule, has built in a higher standard and level to protect folks, even as a matter of consent. It kind of mirrors what we've done with the wiretap statute. And so it's nothing short of significant, but the part that I wrestled with was public safety. And when I saw the presentation going on earlier, I was looking at some folks, and some folks, I could see in your mind you had the same concerns. I'm not concerned actually at all. Officers are going to be able to do their jobs. They're just going to have to abide by the law and the Constitution to do it. And I think that's bottom line up front. So, and I was very, very concerned about the public safety things, and I'm very glad we have some experts, constitutional experts, people that practice in the courtroom every day that come into Annapolis and help us develop good policy. So I want to say shout out to the public defenders on that. After the bill passed and the dust settled, I wrote the Attorney General confidentially and requested a confidential letter of just clarification as to how this was distinguished. And I'll make sure you all have it. I just got it not that long ago. And there's one piece I do want to make sure that I read. I'm just going to read it. That I think provides for somewhat of a cautionary tale as we move forward. So I'm definitely making sure the public defenders have access to this information. So this is distinguishing between what we've done with the wiretap statute and Maryland now Supreme Court case law and the United States Supreme Court jurisprudence. So it says, yet based on the Maryland court's interpretation of the statutory exclusion rule in the State Wiretap Act, it is possible that evidence derived from a violation of House Bill 1070 will be suppressed under the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. In other words, despite an intent and an attempt by the legislature to be clear in the bill language, the scope of the exclusionary rule in House Bill 1070 in practice is likely to be determined by judicial gloss the courts put on it. That is significant because that's exactly what we tried to get away from, which we wanted to be clear and foot stomp our intent. And if you look at how the Supreme Court case has been interpreted for the wiretap statute, there are some reflections of I think, warning there. So I think we need to be vigilant as a Black Caucus and as a legislature to make sure we can pass whatever you want, but it's the way that it's implemented and interpreted. And if the courts come down a certain way, guess what? We'll be back and we'll keep going. So I do want to say thank you to Delegate Crutchfield and to Senator Carter, to Delegate Wilkins, the entire Black Caucus, and to the public defenders for really stepping up and making sure that, in me particularly, it made all the difference in the world. Second thing I'll talk about is just reform that we did with continued efforts for police reform, which is giving the Office of the Attorney General the ability to prosecute, the exclusive responsibility to prosecute if they find the facts necessary and sufficient to incidents where an officer kills a member of the public, an individual is killed. You remember when we had our first kind of tranche of police reform, we gave that office the ability to do those independent investigations, decoupling that process from the state's attorneys that officers and state's attorneys work so closely with. It's not an inappropriate relationship, but it's a close relationship because they're working together to make cases and to prosecute people. And so that whole process has now been separated into the Office of the Attorney General. It's a very good policy because it's going to instill trust and a level of transparency that we've never had here in Maryland. But one thing I'll ask you to do, I didn't have a slide because I'm not as prepared as Delegate North, but I'll say if you Google OAG, Delegate Queen, sorry, yeah, Delegate Queen, my bad, Professor. Delegate Queen, there's the point. If you Google OAG, IID, MD, put Office of Attorney General, Maryland, Independent Investigative Unit, you'll go to a website, and there's actually a really, what I say Gucci dashboard, but it's a really nice dashboard that's really accessible and has all of the information with regard to all of these cases, like the actual investigative files, the video, the dashboard camera, and a heat map as to where it's happening. And the important part is not just the reform and I think the level of trust and transparency that it will instill with the people of Maryland, but also the other information that you're going to be able to glean for the policymaker and for the citizens of Maryland. You're going to be able to see in accessible format who is being shot and killed, or killed otherwise through car chases, how they're getting killed, where they're being killed, and how. And so all that information is going to be invaluable as we continue our efforts for reform and transparency and trust and public safety, because anyone that, I'll just end on this, that anyone that ever tells you that public safety and reform are kind of in opposite of each other is not true. They are codependent. Both of these things require our system to work, and those reforms are making us safer ultimately as Marylanders. So I'm glad that it was a priority of the Black Caucus as well. And so with that, I know we've got a Q&A question coming up. I know my time's up, and I'll give it back to the chair.
Thank you so much, Chairman. And the time is 8 o'clock. We are at time. So we are going to start wrapping this up, as I know folks do not want us to keep you here all night, although we can if you want to keep going. So what's next? We have gathered here and we have gone through our 5 legislative priority areas, and we've talked with you about the bills we prioritize and the bills that we passed in each area. I wanted to share some of our very specific next steps. One is, please connect with us on social media. The most timely way to get updates around what's going on, cannabis legalization next steps that are happening starting on this Saturday, and various issues and events is our social media, our Instagram, our Twitter, and our Facebook. Our social media handles are on that little piece of paper that had the agenda on it when you walked in. So if you didn't grab that, you can grab it on the way out. We will be having listening sessions leading up to the legislative session. Remember, at the very beginning I said, we don't just get started in January 2024 for that session, right? We are planning, we are meeting, we are listening to the feedback and hearing from our communities around what we want to prioritize. So we will make sure all of you are on our email list, if you registered or you signed in at the front, so you hear about listening sessions. We talked a lot today. One of the next activities is that we'll make sure that we hear from you in terms of a listening session where all we do is sit there and just listen to what our community wants us to prioritize. So you can look out for those. We need your help and your support around these bills. You can hear it in the comments from Delegate Crutchfield, the bill sponsor, and Chairman Smith. These bills are not just passing easily. We are advocating, we are showing up in committee rooms, we are calling on our colleagues to pass these bills, and I want to thank our members who are here who are not members of the Black Caucus, like Delegate Solomon, like Majority Leader Moon, and others who've stood with us, and we greatly appreciate your leadership and support. But we need all of you in this room to be testifying, to be speaking up about the priorities and the issues that affect the Black community. We need your support individually and collectively as well. The 7 Montgomery County Black Caucus members, we are small, but we are mighty when it comes to the delegation that we send to Annapolis. And so when we have our individual events and our activities, whether it's signing up for our email list, our individual social medias, please show up and continue to support us as well. And I want to ask the 7 members to just stand one more time and for everyone to just recognize them for their hard work. And finally, we have an annual weekend. If you just can't get enough of us in person and want to hang out and party and get dressed up and support us, we have an annual weekend that includes workshops on the Friday, which will be November 17th, where we'll talk more about various issues leading up to the session. You have an opportunity to engage with us, and a gala on the 18th that we hold every year, which is a major landmark event that we do each year. So save the date for November 18th. Join us at Maryland Live is where we are going to host it that evening. And so you'll be able to connect with us, and we'll be able to get together and have a good time on November 18th as well. So with that, I don't want to leave people hanging who wrote on their questions. So we are going to zip through and then we'll close out. The final, oh wow, you all have, okay, I'm sorry we'll be able to get to all of these, but what I can promise is that as we are coming up with our priorities for 2024, we're keeping these note cards so we can have your suggestions and your questions at the forefront. And I'm just going to go through these quickly. Reparations, absolutely. Black Caucus members have introduced bills dealing with reparations in Maryland, and several states have moved forward with reparations, and that's something that we are considering potentially as a priority in the future. So thank you to the person that mentioned that. Retired military and their veterans. We did pass legislation to expand and ensure that there's tax relief. One of the big issues, and this was a Governor Moore priority, everyone knows that he's a veteran, and the very first bill that he came and testified on in Annapolis as a governor dealt with the retirement benefits for people who are former members of the military. And what that does is that it creates tax relief for that income. Because in Maryland, we do tax that. You're getting those benefits, but we are taxing it at a pretty high rate compared to other states. So we went this year and reduced that tax liability. We do want to get it down to zero. That's the goal. But some financial constraints, we're working little by little to help reduce that. So thank you to the person who asked about retired military and their benefits. All right. Someone mentioned, I'll get back to that one, everyone. I'm sorry, I was not able to read that one. Food insecurity. Black mothers are dying in terms of childbirth. Thank you. And I'm actually going to close this out on that. The Legislative Black Caucus has prioritized maternal health. That's actually one of the areas that I've been able to lead on. Thank you. And this is why we talk about representation matters. Before 2018, when the caucus took up that issue, before I was in the legislature able to introduce 4 different bills dealing with Black maternal health, the legislature had not taken action on that issue for 10 years. But when we are in those seats and able to raise these issues and bring up those critical impacts to our community, it really matters. So we have passed many bills dealing with maternal Black health. The one that I really want to focus in on deals with ensuring that our Maryland Department of Health is taking the lead when it comes to the disparity. It requires a study and recommendations, also a stakeholder group of impacted women who are at the table, at the forefront, sharing their stories and the solutions that are necessary to help make sure that we close the gap in Maryland. Black women are 4 times as likely to die as a result of childbirth in Maryland. And we must close up that gap and ensure that no woman dies because of any type of pregnancy-related issue. So thank you to the person who brought that up and gives the opportunity to talk about Black maternal health. Thank you. All right. So we've gone through these questions, and if your question was not addressed, we are again going to keep every single note card as we work on our 2024 legislative priorities. You all have the what's next in front of you. I want to thank again everyone for being here. Thank every single member of the Legislative Black Caucus for your leadership and for all the work that you do for Black Maryland and all Maryland and in your communities. And with that, once again, as we say in the Maryland General Assembly, we are adjourned. Thank you. Someone has lost their keys. If you find a pair of keys, please bring them to the front. Someone has lost their keys. They have been found. Thank you.